afternoon. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Non-domestic rating, multipliers and private schools bill. Consideration of Lord's message.
Now, I must draw the House's attention to the fact that financial privilege is engaged by Lord's Amendments 1B, 2B, 7B and 8B, and by Lord's Amendments 15B, 15C, 15D and 15E, to the words restored to the bill by the Lords' non-insistence on their Amendment 15. If any of these Lords' amendments are agreed to, I will cause the customary entry, waiving Commons financial privilege, to be entered in the Journal. We will begin with the Government motion to disagree with Lords' Amendment 1B, which we will consider together with the motions to disagree with Lords' Amendments 2B, 7B, 8B, 13B and 15B, 15C, 15D and 15E as on the selection paper. I call the Minister to move the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 1B. Jim.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that this House disagrees with Lord's Amendment 1B. I'm grateful for the opportunity to consider the new Lord's amendments tabled in lieu of the previously disagreed ones by this House. I would like to reiterate my thanks to the Lords and honourable members across both Houses for their continued diligence and scrutiny of these measures. As set out previously, this bill makes provision to enable the introduction of permanent lower tax rates for retail, hospitality and leisure businesses from April 2026, ending the uncertainty of the temporary RHL relief. The RHL relief stopgap measure creates uncertainty for businesses, as well as a significant fiscal pressure on the Government. And so this Government is committed to addressing that through this bill. This Government faces a significant challenge that we must balance the books, and so we cannot and should not make tax cuts without ensuring that those tax cuts are funded, which is why the bill also makes provision to enable the introduction of a higher multiplier for all properties with a rateable value at or above £500,000, ensuring that the permanent tax cut from RHL properties is sustainably funded from within the business rate system itself. This bill also helps deliver on another of the Government's missions set out in the manifesto in breaking down barriers to opportunity. This bill will remove the eligibility for charitable rate relief from private schools that are charities in England. As I said before in this House, the Government believes in parental choice, but it's also determined to fulfil the aspiration of every parent to get the best education for their child. To eliminate the barriers to opportunity, we need to concentrate on the broader picture towards the state sector, where, let's remember, over 90% of children are educated. The revenue raised through the removal of charitable relief will help to deliver on our commitments to education and young people, and help us to meet our overarching mission of breaking down barriers to opportunity for all. Amendments 1B and 7B seek to allow the Treasury to exclude healthcare herediments from the higher multiplier through regulations. Amendments 2B and 8B seek to allow the Treasury to exclude anchor stores from the higher multipliers through regulations. Now, these amendments are unnecessary, as the powers that they seek already exist in the bill. Let me be clear, the powers within the bill already allow the Government, should it so choose, to exclude certain properties from the higher multiplier. This is not the intention, of course, as I've set out. The Government's intention is for the higher multiplier to apply to all properties at or above the £500,000 threshold, to ensure that local multipliers can be adequately funded. As such, I urge the House to reject these amendments because they're not required and duplicate powers that already exist within the bill. I now turn to address Amendment 13B, tabled by Lord Furlow. Amendment 13B would require the Government to undertake a review on how the provisions within the Act may impact businesses whose rateable value is close to the £500,000 threshold. The Amendment 13B requires that this review be laid before Parliament within 6 months of the date in which the Act is passed. Further, Amendment 13B also sets out that this review must consider the merits of a separate use class and associated multipliers for retail services provided by fulfilment warehouses that do not have a material presence on local high streets. Now, we've considered 2 similar Lords amendments previously, and our position has not changed. The amendment is unnecessary. The Transforming Business Rates work currently underway recognises the cliff edge within the business rate system and that they may act as a disincentive to expand. I will reiterate the assurance I previously provided to the House The Government is already looking at this precise issue. The second part of Amendment 13B would require the Government to undertake a review. This will examine the merits of creating a separate use class in business rates and associated multiplier for warehouses that cater for retailers without a material presence on the high street. Again, as previously set out, the Government is already exploring that objective through the existing project mentioned before. The Digitalising Business Rate project will allow us to match property-level data within the business-level data held by HMRC. This will improve the way in which we target business rates. Therefore, the Government remains of the view, for the reasons set out, that the amendment is not required. I urge honourable members to disagree to this amendment. The Government is fully committed to transforming the business rate system. This is simply the first step of a wider programme of change for a system that is long overdue for reform. The Chancellor set out at the Spring Statement last week that the Government will publish an interim report that will set out a clear direction of travel for reform, with further policy detail to follow at the autumn budget, as I previously said. Reforms to the business rate system will be phased in over the Parliament. Now finally, Amendments 15B to 15E seek to move the measure to remove the charitable rate relief from private schools, one being made by Parliament in this bill, to one that would be made by the statutory state through regulations, subject to the affirmative resolution procedure for that statutory instrument. The Government is committed to delivering on its manifesto commitments, and part of that is removing the chargeable rate relief from private schools. To raise revenue to help deliver on our commitments to young people and education, including the state sector, where, again, as I said before, most children are educated. The Government's view is that this is a matter for Parliament to decide, which is why we've invited Parliament to do so through this bill. Therefore, the amendments are unnecessary. And so, for the reasons set out, this Government cannot accept these amendments, and we ask the House to vote to disagree with the amendments as stated.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 1B. Shadow Secretary of State, Kevin Hollinrake.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank their noble lordships for their diligent further consideration of the non-domestic rating, multipliers and private schools bill 2025 and for the new amendments they have tabled to address the concerns on the legislation. These changes shine a spotlight on Labour's muddled priorities, exposing an approach which punishes aspiration, squeezes business and increases the cost of living for consumers and the cost of doing business. This very week we'll see the new job tax introduced, business rate hikes, the Employment Rights Bill coming down the line, which is of great concern to many private sector businesses. And for consumers, this will see consequent higher prices, lower wages, and also tomorrow's hike in council tax, energy prices, water bills, broadband and BBC licence fee. I'll address the four primary groups of amendments in turn. First, there's a turn to Lord's Amendment 1B and 7B, which tackle the proposal to levy a higher multiplier on medical, dental and other healthcare settings. These amendments prudently protect all healthcare premises occupied or vacant from the higher multiplier, addressing a glaring flaw in Labour's bill. For too long, we've cautioned against their detachment from practical governance, and now it's undeniable. Rather than targeting the untaxed profits of internet giants as pledged, they're heaping costs onto hospitals and GP surgeries. It is baffling that Labour's so-called reform of the rating system would burden healthcare at all, let alone while they plan to hike national insurance on jobs tomorrow to fund the NHS, only to claw it back today by taxing those same health services. Just yesterday, this government pledged to funnel more cash into the NHS by taxing jobs through national insurance hikes. Yet today they turn around and tax the NHS itself via business rates. It's a fiscal farce, Madam Deputy Speaker, a two-faced assault on healthcare that undermines their own rhetoric. As my honourable friend for Aldershot noted in recent debates, Labour's obsession with revenue grabs over sensible relief is choking the sectors we need most. Happy to give way.
Thank the Shadow Minister for giving away. Does he agree there does seem to be a disjointed approach where with the Health Secretary asking for more to be done on a health basis within the community, whereas we'd be actually asking anybody that moves from a central location into the community to pay these additional taxes and rates.
Well, he's right. There's no logic to the government's approach. They are giving with one hand, taking with the other, and making those kind of decisions he talks about even ever more difficult. Next, Lord's Amendments 2B and 8B address the ratings regime for anchor stores on our beleaguered high streets. The John Lewis chief, Nish Kankuala, warned, and we echo these words, that Labour's budget is a two-handed grab at retailers, piling on national insurance increases alongside a refusal to reform business rates, as they promised to do. Retailers face a £7 billion hit from these policies, with consumers braced for higher prices as a result. These amendments exempt anchor stores, those vital engines of our town centres, from the higher multiplier, a lifeline Labour seems determined to withhold. Unoccupied anchor stores too would escape this punishing rate, preventing empty shop fronts from becoming permanent scars on our high streets. Setting the threshold for this higher multiplier at £500,000 is a blunt instrument, as the Minister concedes. I can assure the Government that this will have consequences for businesses that are not big tech giants. This will hit large supermarkets, supermarket delivery and large department stores, showing that the Labour Government has not thought this through. My colleagues on this side of the House have rightly decried Labour's neglect of retail, and they are right. The Leader of Opposition has rightly highlighted that Labour's rates multiplier fiasco is killing off the high street while they dodge real reform. Businesses face a double whammy, higher taxes and no certainty, thanks to a government more interested in punishing aspiration than powering growth. Labour's failure to shield these businesses betrays the shopkeepers, the workers and the families who depend on thriving high streets, not ghost towns. Labour are putting both of these costs on retailers on the high street, and exempting anchor stores from the higher multiplier will help support our high streets. Unoccupied anchor stores being not subject to the higher multiplier means that businesses will have less of a strain on them when it comes to making decisions on what they are going to do with their premises. Supporting businesses being able to plan for the longer term is something that we must consider in all pieces of legislation and policy. And something that concerns us on this bill is shared by KPMG, who have described the Government's plan to change the business rate system as set out in this bill as creating uncertainty for businesses when considering the liability that businesses will need to factor in to forward planning. Turning to Lord's Amendment 13B, we confront yet another symptom of Labour's ill-conceived assault on business. Picture this: a thriving firm with a premises valued at £1,495,000 dares to invest in its future, perhaps a modest expansion, new equipment or a refit to stay competitive. That ambition tips its rateable value to just over £500,000 threshold, and what's the reward under this bill? A staggering jump in business rates from roughly £175,000 to £325,000, a near doubling of its tax burden overnight. This isn't fairness, it's a trap, a punitive cliff edge that stares the aspirational and mocks the very notion of fairness. There must be greater accountability for these new multipliers and tiers which threaten to crush businesses under arbitrary thresholds. The Lords are absolutely right to demand a review by the Secretary of State to probe the real-world impact of these changes, especially on firms teetering near that £500,000 mark. Businesses that employ our constituents, anchor our communities and drive our economy. By mandating consultation with sector experts, this amendment ensures future decisions on business rates are rooted in evidence, not ideology, offering Parliament and Government a chance to course correct before more livelihoods are sacrificed to Labour's reckless tax experiment. The final grouping of Lords Amendment 15B, C, D and E relates to perhaps the most objectionable part of the bill, the levying of business rates on independent schools. Let me again reiterate the view of this side of the House: education should never be taxed. Over the weekend, The Times published a number of alarming stories outlining the impact VAT on school fees has had on families. It tells the story of Leanne, a self-employed accountant who works between 5 a.m. and midnight 7 days a week to pay for the increase in costs to her disabled son's education that have come as a result of levelling VAT on school fees, which is exacerbated by the business rates on independent schools. The same article highlights a study which has shown that already 1 in 5 families with a child with SEND who attends a private school have remortgaged their home. 1 in 8 have sold their home altogether. This is before business rates have been levied. And as I've already highlighted before, this bill will also levy business rates on nursery schools and sports facilities on the site of a private school that is used by the general public. This measure is simply wrong, and I agree with the other place that the statutory instrument required to bring in these regulations should be voted on by both houses before the measures can be introduced.
Spokesperson Vikki Slade.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, here we go again. Obviously, this is very similar to what we were talking about last week, so I want to put on record my thanks again to the noble lords for their work in pushing forward these amendments from the other place. We welcome the business rates reform, as you know, and we look forward to far more substantial overhaul of the system. But we are deeply, deeply concerned about the proposals for hospitals. The Lords Amendment 1 sought to exclude hospitals, and it's so disappointing that this wasn't accepted. In my area, in Dorset, both Poole and Bournemouth hospitals would be caught by the 500,000 rateable value rule. Poole Hospital has a rateable value of 2.1 million, Bournemouth 3.3 million. World-famous hospitals, including Great Ormond Street, Royal Marsden, and England's oldest hospital, St Bart's, would all be caught up. Now, the government has rightly been proud of the early delivery of extra NHS appointments, but to keep the hospitals in the bill risks real problems for local councils who may find themselves having to take difficult decisions to take the hit on not charging their hospitals this higher amount. To take away the discretion altogether, please remove these from the bill so that hospitals are not paying twice. I share the concerns of the Shadow Minister regarding those businesses that are on the cusp of the 500 threshold. The impact of flipping just over from the lower multiplier to the higher multiplier could be absolutely profound. And with so many businesses that are already on the cusp with the national insurance increases, the living wage and the impact of the Employment Rights Bill, this additional worry could actually see many businesses fail to invest in their businesses for the future as they're concerned about their tipping over into the higher threshold. I'm going to keep it brief because I think we know where we are on this, that we also don't agree with the taxation of education, and we continue to support the Lords Amendment to remove private schools from this legislation. Of course, the main reason that we feel this way is that we know that many parents of children who've got additional needs will choose the private sector because it's so difficult for them to get what they need in overcrowded schools that are falling apart at the seams. So we fundamentally agree with the principle of taxing education. The government has made a good start on this bill. We want to see much more fundamental review of the business rates. There is a long way to go, but we do think that these amendments, if they were accepted, would demonstrate a government that is listening. And I think at the moment, with the trust needing to be built in government, a government that's listening to sensible amendments would be most welcome.
Jim Shannon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I first of all thank government for bringing it forward, but I have to put on record some concerns that I have, and the Minister will not be surprised that I put these on record. It's never meant in an aggressive way. The Minister will know that, but it's meant in the way that I put things forward, because I think it's important that my people, my constituents, have a chance to express themselves through me in this chamber. So, first of all, in relation to I echo the concerns of the Shadow Minister and the Shadow Minister for the Lib Dems as well. In relation to the hospitals, medical and dental schools, I have some concern over how that will trickle down, as it will inevitably do so, and it will, I believe, put pressure on those sectors where the pressure does not need to be. Their job and the job of those three institutions are to ensure that our hospitals can deliver the care, that our medical and dental schools can produce the students with the expertise and the knowledge to be able to show themselves to be the next generation of those who look after us as we look forward. But my major concern, I have to say, is in relation to the private schools bill. I know it's been echoed many, many times in here. Again, I've got to say it. I can't let this occasion go and not do that. I've sought the direction of Madam Deputy Speaker and others of the parties as well. So members will be aware of this as an issue in the private schools bill, and I've spoken on this on numerous times to put forward the argument for the faith schools in my constituency, for those schools whose parents scrimp and save to ensure that all the money they have will be for their child to have an education standard which they wish to see. Those are the people who have asked me to come here today and put that on record. And the reason I persist in raising this issue is because I truly do believe that some people of faith will be further disadvantaged when this bill goes through. I know it's not probably the intention of the government, but it will be the reality of the government, and for that reason I must put it on record. Whilst the rating section may not apply in Northern Ireland per se, the disadvantage to our sector remains in the removal of the tax considerations which does affect schools in Northern Ireland, and that's where the issue. For the mainland it's quite clear, for us in Northern Ireland it will affect schools as well. However, I wish to be clear that I oppose this on behalf of those faith-based schools on the mainland as well, because what those parents want is the same as the parents have spoke to me that they want as well. So I'm a very proud member of freedom of religious belief, and this extends, I believe, to freedom to educate your child with a view to how your faith is worked into that education, and that's the Lord's Amendment number 15 that the Shadow Minister has referred to, and the Honourable Lady has also referred to. For many parents, confidence that their faith will not be dismantled in a classroom was worth the financial burden of paying into their child's education. But this has been denied by this legislation coming forward. And I believe that they all deserve to have the opportunity to educate their child in the way that they wish to pay probably handsomely for. I believe that these proposals adversely affect the freedom to educate your child in your religious belief, and the option to homeschool is one which parents may not have considered previously and yet now feel this is the only financial option available for them. These parents may not feel qualified or equipped to deal with the skills that are vital to homeschooling, and yet believe there to be no other option, as they simply can't afford to pay the uplifted fees. And that's the burden, an unfair burden, that falls on the shoulders of the parents. Madam Deputy Speaker, I firmly believe that whilst government responds to almost every Lord Amendment was because the Lord's Amendment interferes with the public revenue and affects the levy and the application of local revenues, and the Commons do not offer any further reason, trusting that this reason may be deemed sufficient. Basically, what does that mean? We need the money. So I've been a member of this House for almost 15 years, and an elected representative for some 40 years as a councillor and a member of the Assembly. And never ever have I believed that money is the bottom line, and neither do I believe do many of the right honourable and honourable members here. We cannot take faith-based education out of the hands of a certain class of people to punish those high-class schools with swimming pools. Let me assure this House, Bangor Independent Christian School with their Sunbeams nursery schools has no pool. Regent House Prep in my constituency has no swimming pool either. There are small primary schools that operate and will have difficulty operating when these regulations come into force, and it simply isn't right. I know, and I conclude with this, Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that the strength of Labour government means that this bill will pass, but I'm urging individual MPs across the House to consider who will be punished and to urge government to review this tax raid on education even at this late hour. We believe in the right for living your faith. We cannot tax that right out of reach, and this is where this bill, I believe, has gone wrong, and therefore it divorces itself from the reality of the people that I represent. Madam Deputy Speaker, thanks for letting me in. A pleasure. Thank you.
Minister.
Can I thank members for their contributions to this debate? I think I addressed the majority of the points that have been raised subsequently in the opening speech, but I do want to thank members for their contributions. We've heard honourable members' concerns about the measures in the bill from the opposition, that the multipliers do not deliver on the stated intention of the policy as announced in the budget. We clearly don't agree with that position. At the budget, the government announced its intention to introduce 2 lower multipliers for qualifying retail, hospitality and leisure properties, and to end the uncertainty of the annual RHL relief. Also, as set out in my opening speech, the relief was a temporary stopgap measure. Now, of course, it's been extended year on year, but it doesn't provide the certainty that businesses require. It created a cliff edge. And I felt during our last session, can't remember when it was, it feels like it was yesterday, but he seemed to acknowledge that the cliff edge that was built in the previous system was providing uncertainty to businesses in their ability to plan ahead. He must welcome, surely, that this new lower multiplier, that permanent relief, gives all businesses, whether they're retail, hospitality or leisure, that long-term security that they have been asking for, and importantly, in a way that is sustainable and self-financing through the business rate system. Now, the government, through this bill, is taking the steps to address all the measures that have been outlined. And this chosen approach is both appropriate and prudent. The challenging fiscal environment that the government faces requires it. It's right that any tax cut must be appropriately funded, a part of our commitment to sound financial management. To do this, the government intends to introduce a high multiplier for all properties with a rateable value of more than £500,000 and above. And it's important to say, because we need to settle down some of the arguments that are being made on this, that affects less than 1% of properties in England. So less than 1% of properties in England will pay more, of course. But to fund that lower multiplier for the businesses that we all recognise, for our town streets, our town centres and our high streets. And that's what we need to do. And so this approach does deliver on the policy as set out in the budget and on the manifesto commitment to transform the business rate system to one that is fairer, protects the high street and is fit for the 21st century. On the comment about the multipliers on the healthcare sector that was made, of course, health providers are subject to the same business rate regime, and that's been the case for 25 years when the Crown Estate was ended its exemption from it. Members will know that. They will also know that the financial support given to the National Health Service this year was a record £22 billion to deal with the inheritance that this government found itself in, but more importantly, the legacy that was holding the country back. So that £22 billion is going to where it's needed. And of course, any decisions about future financing is a matter for the Treasury at the appropriate point. On the question of multipliers and the review of the £500,000 threshold, we've already said that there are provisions in the bill to address that, and we, of course, are fully cited.
I'm very grateful to him giving way. He says that what the solution is alighted on meets his manifesto commitments. But in his manifesto, it says the new system will level the playing field between the high street and online giants. That's not what this does, not exclusively. He knows that this is levying extra taxes, extra business rates on high street stores, large department stores, supermarkets, football stadiums, many other things. They are not online giants.
The rating system reflects adequately the scale of the properties involved. So the less than 1% of properties that are in the business rate system that will be captured under the higher multiplier to fund that tax break for lower multipliers on the high street. We heard in the evidence session, he was sat there, where retailers have said, of course, for our distribution centres, that will have an impact. But we have so many stores that are below the threshold, and actually allowing national retailers with multiple locations to benefit means that in the round, they find themselves better off as a result of this policy. And when it comes to rebalancing the online with the on-street, that's exactly what this does. So for the big distribution centres, they will pay this relief. And so, just to conclude, if I can, once again, can I thank honourable members for the contributions that they have made. But for the reasons set out, I respectfully ask that this House disagrees with the amendments put before us. Thank you.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 1B. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
No!
Division! Clear the lobby. The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 1B. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
No.
Tellers for the ayes are Vikki Foxcroft and Jen Kitchen. Tellers for the noes, Jerome Mayhew and Rebecca Poole.
Order, order.
The ayes to the right, 296. The noes to the left, 170.
The ayes to the right, 296. The noes to the left, 170. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 2B. I call the Minister to move the motion formally.
Move forward.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 2B. As many as their opinion say aye.
Aye.
On the contrary, no. No. Division. Clear the lobby. The question is, as on the order paper, many of their opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Tellers for the ayes are Vikki Foxcroft and Jen Kitchen. The tellers for the noes are Jerome Mayhew and Rebecca Poole. Order, order.
The ayes to the right, 301. The noes to the left, 104.
The ayes to the right, 301. The noes to the left, 104. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock. We now come to the motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 7B. I call the Minister to move the motion formally.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 7B. As many of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. Right, I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion to disagree with the Lord's Amendment 8B. I'll call the Minister to move the motion formally.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 8B. As many of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. And the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion to disagree with the Lord's Amendment 13B. I call the Minister to move the motion formally.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 13B. As many of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
No.
Division, clear the lobby. You need to be seated. The question is, as on the order paper, as many of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. No. Tellers for the ayes are Vikki Foxcroft and Jen Kitchen, and the tellers for the noes are Jerome Mayhew and Rebecca Poole.
Yeah.
Order, order.
The ayes to the right, 301. The noes to the left, 167.
The ayes to the right, 301. The noes to the left, 167. So the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Unlock. Order, order. I now must put the question necessary to bring to a conclusion proceedings on the Lord's message. We now come to the motion to disagree with the Lord's amendments 15B, 15C, 15D and 15E to the words restored to the bill by the Lords non-insistent on their amendments 15. I call the Minister to move the motion formally.
Move formally.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their amendments 15B, 15C, 15D and 15E to the words restored to the bill by the Lords non-insistence on their amendment 15. As many as that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no.
No.
Division, lobby. Should it be reminded at every vote? Should it be reminded at every continue? Question is, as on the order paper, as many in that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. Tell us for the ayes are Vikki Foxcroft and Jen Kitchen. Tell us for the noes are Jerome Mayhew and Rebecca Poole. Order, order.
The ayes to the right, 302. The noes to the left, 167.
The ayes to the right were 302. The noes to the left were 167. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock. Minister to move that a committee be appointed to draw up reasons.
I beg to move that a committee be appointed to draw up reasons be assigned to the Lords for disagreeing to their amendments. That Jim McMahon, Jen Kitchen, Mark Ferguson, Harpreet Uppal, Emily Darlington, Kevin Hollinrake and Tessa Munt be members of that committee, that Jim McMahon be the chair of the committee and that the three be the quorum of the committee, that the committee do withdraw immediately.
The question is that a committee be appointed to draw up reasons to be assigned to the Lords for disagreeing to their amendments 1B, 2B, 7B, 8B and 13B, and to their amendments 15B, 15C, 15D and 15E, to the words restored to the bill by the Lords non-insistent on their amendment 15, that Jim McMahon, Jen Kitchen, Mark Ferguson, Harpreet Uppal, Emily Darlington, Kevin Hollinrake and Tessa Munt be members of the committee, that Jim McMahon be the chair of the committee, that 3B the quorum of the committee, that the committee do withdraw immediately. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. That concludes consideration of the Lord's message relating to the non-domestic rating, multipliers and private schools bill.